this planning commission meeting to order. The day, we're calling the order, please. All right, today is August 28th, 2024, and we would like to start this meeting as is custom with a Pledge of Allegiance offered by Mr. Jensen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, commissioners, may we now do our roll call, starting over here.
Adam Shin, no conflicts.
Lisa Jensen, no conflicts.
Andrew South, no conflicts. Jonathan Hill, no conflicts.
Melissa Kendall, no conflicts.
Barbie DeSoto, no conflicts.
And Jeff Whitlock with no conflicts. Although this is a public hearing, only the presenters and those invited by the commission may speak or ask questions unless otherwise invited by the chair. Please wait to be called on. When speaking, be sure to speak into the microphone so that the record is clear. Please state your name and city of residence for the record. Please limit side conversations as they interfere with the audio recording and proceedings of the meeting. If you need to have a side conversation, please step out of the chamber. Please do not attempt to interrupt or speak over others. Intimidating or threatening speech or behavior will not be tolerated at any time. Please refrain from clapping, cheering, booing, or being otherwise disruptive during the hearing. We will now start with item number one on our agenda, which is Development Services Request an Ordinance Text Amendment to Section 14.38.030 in order to amend language to sign code exemptions for temporary election campaign signs. Scott Johnson will give the presentation on this item. Thank you.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you. So a few months ago, we received a complaint about an electronic sign on private property in a residential neighborhood. We went to go look at it and looked at the code and noticed that our code gave a blanket exemption to electronic signs on private property. And so understanding that generally speaking, the city is desirous not to have electronic signs in residential neighborhoods. I worked with our legal department in drafting this small text amendment so that we can regulate where electronic signs, campaign signs that are electronic in nature, meet the same regulations. So here's just the quick amendment. It's a very small section within the code and the exemptions. Previously, the only the code allowed a blanket exemption other than not allowing election campaign signs to be in the public right of way. What this does is ensure that they can still not be in the public right of way, and they also, if they're electronic in nature, must meet the requirements as in the location, which zones that they're allowed in. That's where the 14.38.010 subsection 3 refers to. So that will explicitly prevent electronic campaign signs from being located in residential type neighborhoods. And I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Commissioner Jensen?
Just to clarify, you started off by saying electronic signs in neighborhoods, but the language that I see here seems to only be talking about campaign signs. Are electronic signs still allowed in neighborhoods, or was it specifically just that campaign signs had few restrictions on them, and so you wanted to make sure you wrap those into the same electronic sign restrictions?
Make sure I understand if I understand your question.
Did this language fully exempt all electronic signs in neighborhoods, or did it just catch the loose end of the campaign signs?
So what this did is it gave an exemption to campaign signs. That the only restriction on campaign signs currently in the code was that they couldn't be in the public right of way. What this does is it says the exact same thing, except for if it's an electronic display or electronic or animated campaign sign, they need to follow the same rules as other electronic signs throughout the city. So they're prohibited in
Okay. That's
various
what I
residential
read in the
neighborhoods.
staff report, but when you started your
I think it was a-
presentation, you said,
I missed
we
you.
don't want electronic signs in neighborhoods. And so I didn't know if you were somehow trying to address other
Oh,
electronic sign
Okay,
uses.
my
in neighborhoods.
apologies
Okay.
for the confusion.
And my apologies for my confusing roundabout question,
You're fine.
clarifying question.
Any other questions for Mr. Johnson?
I have one question. What is in section 14.38.010?
So that is the section that outlines where electronic signs are prohibited, and the various zones that includes are special development plan overlay zone, the historic downtown district, the A1, RA, RC, R1, R2, VLDR, LDR, MDR, HDR, mixed use, and neighborhood mixed use zones. So those zones explicitly prohibit all electronic signs. Currently in the code, this exemption basically says campaign signs are exempt from this. Now we're saying you're no longer exempt from this if you're an electronic campaign sign.
Thank
It's
you.
actually attachment 2 in the report.
Do we have any other questions? All right, I think we're good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any discussion among the commission before moving to public comment? All right, in that case, we'll now open the hearing to public comment. When your time is up, you will hear a ding and the microphone will be muted. Each person may make one comment. If we have questions, we invite you to come back to the microphone at that time. This time is for comments only. If you have questions about an item, please speak to staff privately. If there are any neighborhood and district chairs present, I'd invite you to come forward first and you may have 3 minutes. All right, seeing as I do not see anyone coming forward, we can move to general public comments. All right, seeing no further comments, we will now close public comments. Commissioners, is there any discussion on the item? Commissioner Kendall?
Would it be easier to just take that out and have no exemptions? Is that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I guess I'd like to understand just the original intent behind the exemptions for campaign signs generally. Just that might be helpful.
I think if you were to remove the exemption, then it would technically be offsite advertisement, which is not allowed throughout the city. So campaign
that
signs
keeps
would
signs.
not be able to be posted in individuals' front yards. And I think the initial intent of this was to allow for campaign signs to be posted throughout the city on private property so people can promote the candidates that they want to promote.
Isn't that a state code too, that you have to allow it or no? That's like a free speech or something that requires you to allow campaign signs?
I'm not sure of state law on that.
Okay.
Can you go back to the exemptions page? Because it just seems kind of messy. Couldn't it just say the exemption is electronic campaign signs? Temporary electronic campaign signs are the only exemption.
So temporary election campaign
Election.
signs, except that these signs shall not be located in the public right of way or on public property and may not be electronic displays or animated signs, except as such signs are permitted by 1430.010. So I know it does sound kind of wordy.
seems-
This was
Wordy and kind of messy, but
this was the recommendation from legal on how to word it best to make sure that we're achieving what we're wanting to achieve.
okay.
Sure sounds like legal.
Yeah.
I get it though. Makes sense.
It might be more clear. Maybe this isn't a question, so I'll talk about it later.
No, I mean, we're in discussion. Feedback is welcome.
Yeah, maybe just to break out each thing may not be located on a public right of way, like bullets or, or on public property, may not be electronic display. Does that make sense? So.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might just, it's the same language, just visually broken out to read better
Yeah.
and understand
we
the
can
different ideas.
certainly do that.
For what it's worth, I like it. It's makes a lot of sense. I'm think it's important that people can promote the candidates that they like to promote on their private property, but I think it's reasonable to not allow them to be glowing billboards for your candidate of choice in a neighborhood. So I'm supportive. Any other discussion, or would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. Is that okay?
Yeah, let's do
Okay.
it.
I make a motion that we forward a positive recommendation to the city council for item number 1, development services requests an ordinance text amendment to section 14.38.030 in order to amend language to sign code exceptions for temporary election campaign signs.
Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Fantastic. Before we go to a vote, is there any discussion on the motion? All right, no discussion on the motion. Let's vote, starting with Commissioner Shin.
Aye.
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 I
And I will vote aye. That ends item number 1. We will now move to item number 2, Development Services Request Ordinance Text Amendments to Title 14 with regards to multifamily amenities. Hannah Salzl will give this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll keep this presentation brief since this was also discussed in the pre-meeting. This came about from a council request looking at making EV chargers more accessible and more common in multifamily developments. Obviously, there are a lot of different ways this could be addressed. We are pursuing the encourage and code option that was proposed by Development Services during the meeting as a possible scored menu of amenities that would rank EVs highly, or EV chargers highly, which would make it more viable and more desirable for developers without mandating them. It also allows the city to clean up some other amenities issues we've been having, like a lack of pet space leading to destruction of adjacent park strips and parks. Quickly, what it does and doesn't do, I won't spend much time on this. It simply creates a scored list of amenities and sets a total score with a few additional parameters. This is clarifying existing requirements for amenities space. We are not changing except for 2, which we'll show on the next slide. This does not attach an incentive or anything to this baseline score that developers have to meet. That is just a baseline for receiving their permits. But it does allow some flexibility. The developer can customize, choose what options they'd like as long as it totals 60, and the department is allowed to authorize substitutions. It's not a full green package. It doesn't make any requirements. And again, it doesn't change total amenity space required, except in neighborhood mixed use zones and downtown core zones where the threshold triggering this requirement was increased to make it a little bit easier for developers. We found that those numbers have been a little too low in the past. Developers on the whole were neutral to positive about this. Those that had concerns listed them for us, and we were able to address those in the final version. General consensus was that good developers are going to do this anyway. This is kind of where the market is going. It's very feasible for them, but it raises the bar for maybe some of the not so good actors to encourage them to get more of a variety of amenity space. It also sets out very clearly what the city would like to see. So even those good actors who said we're more or less doing this anyway, we appreciate the city telling us what your priorities are so that we can bring the planning commission and council the sorts of projects that further the city's goals that they want to see, that they can be excited about. These are the proposed scores. I won't linger too much on this. It is in the staff report and we can come back to it anytime. You'll note that the top 3 ranking scores are the open space for pet waste and the EV charger and EV readiness, pursuing those council priorities. And the total score a developer must meet is at least 60, which can be done with combinations of a high and 2 middles or a high and 2 lows, but it doesn't let them just pick from the low-hanging fruit on the table. Applying this to some other recent good developments we've liked, they pass that threshold. It's a very feasible option for good developments. Looking at the proposed text, I've had to break it into 2 slides. This section is just restating requirements that are in other portions of our zoning code. Landscaping and setbacks don't count as open space. Open space has to be functional. Only half of that space can be at ground level, like an outdoor gathering space, already trying to encourage more variety. And this proposed amendment furthers that goal. Second portion outlines the minimum SOAR of 60, authorizes flexible substitutions, and requires that these amenities be maintained or swapped out. If one is dropped, then another must be added. Also adds a requirement that these are for residential use in the building, not commercial use, addressing some concern by developers that didn't want to have to operate a public dog park just because they had a public amenity space. Staff would recommend adding a phrase that wasn't caught when we were writing the initial staff report. This text in blue here in 2B, that a developer is probably not going to be the one maintaining these in the future, and an HOA or the other responsible party should be added to that list so that they're captured as well moving forward. Does the Planning Commission have any additional feedback on the proposed amendment?
Can you go back to the table where you broke it out with the lot sizes versus
Yes.
floor sizes?
Threw this together quickly based on what we talked about in the
Mhm.
pre-meeting.
Yeah, good job. That was fast. So it does look like the mixed use zone is percent floor area, but is 20%, right?
Let me double check on that. And this was a quick throw together between meetings, but I'm pretty sure. That was that mixed use
Mixed
or
use,
neighborhood
MU.
mixed use? Yeah, mixed use is 20% or more of the gross floor area.
I just have a question on applicability here.
Mhm.
Things like townhouses, does this apply to?
If it is the number of units, or if they have at least the number of units to trigger the requirement, then yes.
Okay,
For
So
the
it's-
sake of EV charging, that's less of an issue. They have outlets in their garage, but for the other amenity spaces, yes.
got it. Makes sense. Okay, any other questions? Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from the commission before we move to public comments? All right, we will now open the hearing to public comments. When your time is up, you will hear a ding and the microphone will be muted. Each person may make one comment. If you have questions, we invite you to come up to the microphone at that time. Public comments are now open to the general public. You'll have 2 minutes. All right, seeing as there are no public comments, we will now close public comments and the commission will now discuss the item. Commissioner Shin.
Yeah, I have, well, one thought I was looking at this, given that the kind of the proposed or the motivation behind this was on the topic of electric vehicles, specifically around like the charging and parking spots. I guess looking at this, to me, it seems like the amenities score and the way that they're scored is pretty easy to hit 60 without touching EVs at all, at least in the way that I'm looking at it. Like I think about I live in an apartment building that has, I'm pretty sure that, well, I guess I'd also be curious to know like kind of what's like the minimum to hit these things here. Cause like I live in an apartment building that has, I'm pretty sure what would count as an outdoor gathering space and an indoor gathering space. And they're pretty small and nobody usually gathers in them because they're not really like, a place that a lot of people want to use, I think. But just looking at those two, some sort of an outdoor gathering space, indoor gathering space already gets you to 60 points. And there's probably a lot of other combinations of things that would be pretty low effort for a developer to include that could get you to 60 points without even really pushing to actually include EV charging spots is that's my thoughts on that.
Commissioner Jensen.
In response to that concern, I think we just have to remember that they are required to provide us, this is the question I brought up in the study session, where they're required to provide a certain number of spaces or of area, right? So it's 10% or 20% of their development that has to be filled with amenity space. So if they put a puny little park and no one wants to use it, they still have to have X number of square footage in amenity space in some other way. So though that did raise a question for me, Hannah. If they do the EV charging station, for example, that's a parking lot. Does that space then count as amenity space acre area wise? How does that get measured as far as meeting the percentage of the area required?
That was one of the challenges and is the exact reason why the pet waste option ended up being above EVs. It was given extra points because it has a larger footprint. So while the EV charging station does have a pretty small footprint, it still gets the person a lot of points. So that lets them maybe have a larger open space. They
But you
have to
do
balance
in
that out
fact
some way.
count the space devoted to the EV station as part of their percentage coverage?
It would be an amenity space.
Is
Yeah.
it the whole parking stall or just where the
That's a
equipment
good
is?
question that's not clarified in code.
That would be something I
imagine
would,
the stall would be included because the charger itself is useless without a place to put the car that's attached to the charger.
but what
I
if
imagine
that's,
how
because there's
staff would
one
read
that's
it.
just that it's ready. So how do you measure the percentage space coverage on that one, right? If it's just EV ready?
The EV readiness is installed at the stall. So it,
So you would include, so just make
It
sure
has
your
everything
language
but the
says
little
how you're
pump
going
on
to
top.
measure that.
Okay.
Because we're trying to increase amenity space, we're trying to increase useful
Mhm.
amenity space and trying not to create loopholes for somebody to say they're going to do, just put in infrastructure instead of a more expensive amenity. So
Yeah,
make
for
sure that
me,
it's
I like,
measurable.
I like counting the parking space. That makes sense. One thing to think about though is sometimes chargers can be placed between two spots.
For two people to
And
use.
and so there'd have to be something about, it'd have to have two cords with it or something like that if you're going to count both those spots. And
Based
have the
on-
electrical that could be capable of two cars.
based on staff's reading of the code, historically, I believe that's how staff would read it as is, but we can add language. Do we need a motion for that since it's going to go in the ROA? Or is that something staff can just add?
Looks like we're recommending approval, right? So
That's
we
up
could
to you.
always just say.
Should we choose to do so?
Yeah, up to you. So you can recommend approval with conditions such as the HOA responsible party addition, an addition clarifying what counts as EV space with parking lots or parking stalls.
I think it's actually kind of, what do I want to say? It doesn't encourage open space that's usable if it's a parking space. Like, I feel like that goes against the whole point of the open spaces and like the amenity spaces. And I see why they try to do it this way, but I also think that if they count that, like, how much of their parking lot are they counting as open space? And a parking lot is not a human-centered space. It's just not. It's not safe. It's not usable. Like, what are people going to bring their barbecues on? That's not really appropriate. So, like, I think there's kind of a conflict there between where this is placed in the group with the other things. It's
Yeah.
like it sort of is like doesn't fit in my view. And I also, like I said earlier, I do think that walkability should be as favored as
Mhm.
dog parks and EVs, personally. Like that's also in the general plan. It's the goal.
Maybe to rephrase Commissioner DeSoto's question, should we allow those spaces to be counted as parking spaces and as amenity space? I would probably suggest not. They're already being counted as parking spaces. They shouldn't be double counted then as amenity space.
They just
Which
count
should they
towards
be?
the points that they get, but they
Right.
don't actually contribute to the area. Just
Yeah.
like a bike
Right.
repair station isn't going to really tick away at the area of amenities required, but it does get points towards the caliber of amenities.
Oh, that's like 3 whole square feet. Come on.
Yeah, just like your EV station.
Yeah.
But I still think you need to clarify exactly what boundaries of that EV infrastructure, are you counting every linear foot of of wiring that goes under the asphalt before they pour it, or is it just, does it get any area at all
No,
from the
It's
station?
it's an amenity, but it doesn't get it counted as area.
Okay, so you
Right.
can figure out how to word that.
So it should contribute to the total number of parking spaces, even though it's usable only by a few cars, and should not contribute to overall area space.
Yeah, I think so.
Amenities.
That's what I would
Overall amenities,
recommend,
sorry.
yes.
I just have since we're in the discussion part, I like that we can use this as a tool in the future to assign higher points to priorities as they change. So if in 10 years, dog waste isn't at the top of our list, or EV stations, there's too many of them, then we can reassign the numbers without losing the intent of the idea that this is a way to incentivize useful amenities. I like that power that is written into that.
Yeah, you can add drone helipads whenever you're ready.
Exactly.
Oh, please help us. Just kidding.
DoorDash spots or
Yeah.
whatever.
I mean, it is interesting. I've wondered how the points came to where they were. It does sound like you guys did some sanity checks, which is excellent. But I'd love to see going forward kind of the mixes that we end up getting, right?
Yeah.
And how effective they are, and be open to changing some of the point weightings if it's not working right.
I think that 5 projects will give us a good idea of any tweaking that needs to be done. So
Yeah.
that's something just to keep on planning staff radar.
If all
make
5
sure we
projects
don't
have the
wait to-
exact same mix, we know there's
Yeah.
a problem.
Yeah.
We have two big
Commissioner
projects
Salzl, you were gonna
coming
say
in.
something?
I'm just curious if when you're putting this together, if you looked at past projects and the amenities, just to see what that mix would have added up to.
A little bit, and in talking with past developers too, seeing what projects they'd done, they ran them through this score table to see how they would have scored. Bringing back up Commissioner Shin's point, indoor and outdoor gathering space does give a lot of points, and those are very, very common. So most of the good developments that we've seen had that plus one other thing or something that balanced it out, but it was a pretty good balance. Enough that it's not onerous for the good developers, but it raises the bar for the others.
I think in one glitch that we could stumble upon is that pet space will become more important than human space, and we don't want that to happen either.
Yes, there is the requirement that no more than 50% of the total amenity space can be outdoors at the ground level. So unless
Okay.
they have a ground level amenity park and like a rooftop dog park, that they're both counting.
Okay.
That couldn't all be amenity space.
Can outdoor,
It also only counts once.
yeah, so like if you put in a dog park,
Mhm.
does that mean humans can't use it? Like, are you intending it to be human only space?
I wouldn't let my toddler play in a dog park, even if it
I
was
wouldn't either.
authorized for humans. But that is also only worth 41 points. They'd still be deficient 19 points and need to put in some other amenities that hopefully would give a more rounded portfolio if they're smart and they're trying to market to a broad audience.
One question I have is curious why bike repair station instead of and excluding bike stands? Are
As
they-
bike parking.
Yeah,
you
bike
mean?
parking,
We
correct.
already have bike
We already have that
parking
requirement?
standards. We did
Okay.
look at covered bike parking being an amenity, also things like assigned parking spaces. It was determined that those maybe should be more standard and so will be
I see.
addressed in the future code update rather than as an amenity.
Okay, that makes sense. How flexible on some of these I know we talked about a little bit of this in our study session, but just to pull on the thread a little bit more, like the definitions of some of these things, like if someone put in a hot tub versus a pool, could they get counted towards a pool?
That's a good question. I think as it is now, Aaron, what would you say? Do we count hot tubs as pools currently? I think currently it's a general amenity space, but would we account a hot tub as a pool?
We count it towards amenity space for sure. And I think that subsection B kind of addresses that, where we can use Bill's discretion and kind of be creative on.
Okay, so there's discretion to account things that are like, but maybe not exactly the same.
Right.
And in that discretion, you would
Sorry.
maybe reduce the amount of points that were given to that because it wasn't really.
We could potentially, but
We
yeah.
could add language that scores could be adjusted as necessary if the planning commission would like that flexibility.
I think so. If you're going to give discretion for they can allow a use, then you need to give discretion for them to assign points to that use.
Yeah, I agree with that, because if the most similar amenity, for example, to a hot tub is a pool, then they would get the points for the pool according to this language.
So adding the language possibly to the end of subsection 2A here, of the most similar amenity on the given list and to adjust the score accordingly.
Yeah, I like that. Commissioner Shin.
I'll make a quick comment. I guess I think my feeling looking at this is I wonder a little bit if is it too limiting to have just a fixed set of amenities that we, even with the opportunity to amend and to do that, is like when I think about places I've lived, a lot of them have these kinds of things, but are there things that, I mean, like probably a decade ago, 10, 15 years ago, would a co-work space have been something that came up at all as like a priority for people that might not have even been on people's radar. Whereas now it is like we think, oh yeah, that's an important thing to have. But are there things in the future or even things right now that are like, I mean, I know places that do like, like a maker space, like with like a workshop kind of space or something like that, or I don't know, I mean, like a shared kitchen or some sort of like an outdoor cooking station or something like that. I wonder if are there things here where if we only set this and then say, or you can have discretion to try to kind of, petition for an exception to do this instead or this instead, is it, what I'm saying? Like, is it too limiting to just have a fixed set of things? And I guess one of the other things I wonder is with the electric vehicle, with it being this kind of, we put electric vehicles on here, but would it make more sense like with the question of like covered bike parking, where covered bike parking is kind of covered by code as its own separate thing, or it maybe in the future be covered as its own separate thing, because we view that as more of like a crucial infrastructure kind of thing as opposed to just like a recreational amenity, and I wonder like, does it make more sense that, should electric vehicle charging be thought of in that same kind of way as like a core infrastructure aspect as opposed to something that could be just swapped out and, for a dog park or for other kinds of recreational amenities? I think that's kind of the concerns that I'm sitting with right now.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. Even if those exceptions are allowed, it might just become too easy to pick stuff off the list and never even try for an exception, right? And so some of these other things, you brought up some great ideas there, would never happen, and that might be a negative.
The electric vehicle charging station is a very interesting one. The potential counter to that is just that the market will probably be responsive, but it's a good point. I think it's a good point. To your point, like you said, 6% in May or 2024 were electric vehicles, so we're already below that. And that number, I was looking at the data, has just been kind of going up pretty consistently. I would imagine in a decade from now, a quarter or more will all be electric vehicles, but I mean, we'll see.
Well, especially if you include plug-in hybrids, which you do want to plug in.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yep.
So
The developer that reviewed the score table with me has a hybrid and so was very sensitive to that. Coincidentally, I didn't know until we talked about it. To your first point, we did try to address some of the flexibility. The code can be amended as needed. Should we find people making requests for the same substitution, then maybe that's a sign to update the code and add something in. For the EV discussion, that hits on the crux of what the council was discussing in their work section on February 20th that sparked this entire thing. The council seemed very split on whether or not it should be a mandate or whether or not it should be left to market-driven forces. This seemed like a good possible middle ground where we're not requiring it, but we are saying that the city would like to see it. It's something we value highly. It's a difficult line to walk.
My honest truth on a lot of these is that the cost to point ratio is kind of not
out of whack.
Yeah, it's not proportional in my opinion, but like to your point though, like the market demand also will be a factor. So, and I don't have like intuition around that, but I have pretty strong intuition that the cost is. So if I were just trying to if the thing is that's interesting is like in Provo, the way I think about the market is there's more demand than there's supply generally, which puts less demand on the developers to necessarily provide market demanded amenities because you could build whatever you want and you're going to fill the units because we just have way more demand than supply. So that's why the cost point comes to mind for me is because like if I'm a developer and I know I have an undersupplied market, then I can just kind of put the lowest amount of cost-based things here per point, meet the requirements, and I'm fine. I make the most money that way because I don't need to deliver the amenities to win. So that's the one thing that's a little I'm just kind of thinking about, but I don't know if that resonates with anyone else.
Yeah, one I noted was specifically that if you put in the charging station, you only get 3 extra points.
Yeah, exactly. But the cost is dramatically more.
Yeah, that's the most expensive part of the whole
Correct.
project.
Yes.
If the council or if the commission agrees on adjusting numbers, that's something we can include in our recommendation to council. One of the concerns that we came to as we were assigning values and making this feasible for cheaper developments is that we also want to be sensible or aware of the cost of housing and be
Totally.
sensitive to that.
Totally. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, yeah, I say that point specifically with the electrical vehicle in mind and as it relates to Commissioner Shin's point. So, any other points of discussion, or how are we feeling on this? Do we want to?
I think for me, I have 2 outstanding concerns. One is the point total that's required of 60. I'm curious if that needs to be just a little bit higher to kind of push some of these nicer amenities. Like what was mentioned, if you just have an indoor gathering space and outdoor gathering space, you've done it. If we up that just a little bit, then you have to have a little more variety, right, in there. So, but I would have to look at a bunch of different projects and stuff to really get a feel of what that right level is. It would take some legwork. And then also individual point totals. How can they be tweaked to try to incentivize it? I think overall, the idea of an incentive-based system is kind of an interesting middle ground here. I personally, in this case, would actually, with the state of the market right now, be okay requiring it. We're only requiring 5%. That doesn't seem overly burdensome to me. But I can see how some people don't want to do that, and this might be a good compromise in that case. But I do think it's going to take some work to get right.
I wonder I'm inclined to agree about just if this is a basic infrastructure to just say this is what we require. But I do think that the need for it is not even across every development. Like if you're dealing with students, I don't think they're going to have EVs very commonly. Maybe a few will, because they tend to be a little more expensive right now. Maybe their parents gave it to them, but like I just think that it's not in Provo in particular with the really high student population. It might not be as evenly across as a mandate would make it. And so that is one benefit for the, dare I say, market to decide, the developer saying, well, who is this for? What do they want? What do they have? What are their needs? And be sensitive.
We have to remember though, this is not going to be retroactively applied to the old complexes. This is going to be the new ones, and they tend to be more pricey and they attract people that have more extra cash sometimes. And I think like what Commissioner Shin said in the work session about, I think that was you, that you couldn't buy an electric vehicle because your apartment complex didn't have the infrastructure to charge it.
I don't think that was me.
Oh, I
Okay.
cited a survey saying
You
about 1
said
in 10
that.
Utah,
Okay,
1 in 10
you
Utah
said
responded
that.
to that given survey.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
And so, it's like the chicken and the egg, what's going to cause change to take place. And I think when we're talking about new construction, we haven't really seen a cheap new construction project that's targeted at students in a while. Most of them are smaller that wouldn't even hit this threshold or targeted at a slightly different audience. That's not.
There's the one behind Brick Oven. That's the only one I can think of.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see if we have any data on how what sort of happens when there's a new place. That's the cool place. Because when I was in school, it was one of the condos over by used to be Seven Peaks. That was like the rich kids live there. What's the
Belmont?
nicest Belmont? Yeah, maybe
Belmont.
it's still like that. I don't know. I'm not ear to the ground on that. But and then some other places become the like less desirable because of the new. So I'd be interested to see if we had data on how that moves. But I just wonder if even so, if all new developments going forward will have an even need for it, like across all? Or will there be some, I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah, I like that eye to flexibility. It is interesting to me actually how much electric vehicle interest there is among students. I've talked to a couple now who are buying them for this year. And then when I was driving by BYU today, it was really hilarious. This girl clearly didn't know how an electric car works because she hit the gas, the wheels peeled out, her head went back, and she accelerated way faster than she thought she would. But
The learning curve.
the learning curve. But so there may be more demand than we realize in that market. But still, I'm open to that kind of flexibility. The question just becomes, how do we make sure that the point total and the point values for individual items are the right values?
Changing gears just a little bit, I do think I strongly agree with increasing the threshold on number of units. I really like that feedback. I wonder if for the point of housing costs, maybe it could even be higher in DT, but I think I'm very supportive from going the 5 to the 20. I think it's a great change. One thing, sorry to bring us back just a little bit, because I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So, you know, the I-250 townhome development right across from Smith's?
Yes, yeah.
How is that in compliance with this? I'm just confused. I'm a little
I'm not
confused.
familiar with the specifics on that plan.
I just
Aaron,
don't,
Bill?
is it because
know?
they're able to count the rooftop decks towards the amenity space?
Yes.
Must
Okay,
be.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Rooftop does count. We've seen that in
Rooftop,
other
okay.
developments as
That,
well. Yes.
so
sorry.
in townhomes, you can use rooftop decks as a way to meet these requirements.
Yes.
Makes sense. Okay.
Let me just clarify one thing. The planning commission is voting up or down on the amendment that's in front of you.
Correct.
If you have input that you think is significantly better, that you would prefer, then you should vote down on this amendment and then make a subsequent motion for what you would suggest for an amendment that you would feel good about. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pepperoni.
I have a clarifying question about that. So not passing it on with these concerns, we would say basically turn it away and come back with something different or
Yes.
modified.
Yes.
So it's not a continuation in this sense.
By the way,
Well,
sorry.
This is a pretty complex thing we're discussing. So if you think you need to continue this so that you can formulate what you think you need, that's fine. But my point just is that once the staff puts an amendment in front of you, you vote up or down on it. If you're not comfortable with it, vote down and then make a subsequent motion, what you would recommend.
If we like
Council.
the basic part of it and we have like 4 things we want to refine better, you would still say vote down and we'll come back with a new motion.
Yes,
Okay.
because then what the city council is going to be given is 2 versions. Here's what the staff recommended. Here's what planning commission recommended.
Okay.
They'll be given 2 versions.
So it's
And you
not
can still-
continuing it, Lisa. I think we just
The
make a new
attorney's office
motion.
suggested that we make it more clear, this path more clear, and that's why I'm suggesting this.
If you need time to decide on a replacement for the new motion, we can still continue from this item. And then in the next meeting, when this item is rediscussed, make the motion then, if you need time to workshop what your replacement is.
Could we
So-
continue at asking for some more information on past developments, how they would score, what they would look like? I feel like that would really help me feel like if the scores are right, kind of thing.
Yeah, Commissioner Kendall. You're gonna say
The
something?
one concern I have is, I think if you're gonna make things, electric vehicle charging infrastructure ready and give it 35 points, but then only 3 points higher, like somebody already mentioned, to have them installed. I don't see how that incentivizes people to get them installed, and they're not useful unless they're installed.
That is one of
So,
my primary.
I think
yeah.
it ought to be just installed.
Okay, I've been writing down all of our suggestions. Would it be helpful at this point in our discussion if I read back what we've stated and then maybe Mr. Pepperoni can help guide us on whether that's a thumbs down or a continuation that we would want to head towards? Is that okay?
Yeah, that works. Thank
Okay.
you.
For section 2A, actually, I'll go in order over how I wrote it. Section 2B, we would want the additional language that you presented about the HOA and responsible party. So that's something you've already presented to us. We would like a clarification for what counts as amenity space with the EV charging areas. In section 2A, we would like to add language about adjusting the scores on the uses as approved by that are approved by the department director. We would like to possibly adjust the scores. I don't know if possibly is a strong enough word. We would like to adjust the scores so that they correspond better with the cost and the amenity benefit to the tenants and the developers, I guess.
And the score total.
We would like to
Yeah,
revisit having a higher score total, whether 60 is enough.
I think just the one thing I'll add is I think in principle, agreed with most of these items. I think the specifics are kind of what matter. And so I don't think like us just kind of riffing on in this meeting is going to get us to the proper specifics. So my question to Commissioner Pepperoni is, would you recommend we continue and study these things to come back?
That's what I feel like
Yeah.
too. That's why I asked if continuation or, so we vote down. No, we vote to continue. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, then we can stop discussing.
So if there's specific information you want from staff, like scoring of past projects, we can get that to you. But that may make it difficult for you then to render a decision in your next meeting.
We could have a study session on this and review the scoring together. I think we could make a decision if we did that.
Okay, we can do that. We can
How does-
schedule this
does
for a
that
study
sound-
session and a business item in the next meeting.
Yeah. Commissioner South?
Can I just add one more?
Yeah,
In
of
addition
course.
to potentially scoring some past projects, also looking at thresholds. If we move these number of units up, that's great. What happens when the number of units is quite a bit higher? I wonder if also the scoring ought to map to the number of units. That's a
Hmm.
whole nother layer.
Like a 200 unit.
Yeah, exactly.
You know
And I don't
what,
how many
though?
we have, but scoring past projects may be helpful to look at.
The thing I thought about that is that I think the percentage of square footage that they have to meet will automatically do that because
That's true, but but there's only a few of these.
you're
that
saying they could have
adjust.
more amenities instead of more of certain amenity
Exactly.
few
More
amenities.
diversity of amenities rather, because you'd still get the space for a few of those, but the others don't really contribute to space very much, but they
Yeah.
are important amenities, so.
That's a really good point. Just mathematically, that's how it kind of works up at the scale. Okay, so just as we move towards this continuation motion, it's helpful to include in that motion the data that we would like to see, correct?
Yes.
Or can we do that? Okay. So I hear some examples of recently scored developments. Are there specific zones that we would like to focus on in that?
Just
to
a
kind of-
variety of them, I think.
Yeah, so a couple from some of the most commonly, a variety of the most commonly developed zones, I would probably say.
I would also like to add to that it would be interesting to compare the smaller with the larger and
Correct.
see if the diversity of amenities would matter. You know, like if for example, we were to look at the mill race and what they are planning to do and how it would have scored if this was part of its approval process versus the outcome of what we got that we think is going to be nice. So that might be interesting to compare large and small projects.
So a couple developments, large and small, in a few of the most highly likely to build zones. Does that sound appropriate?
I think it'd be interesting to see specifically recent developments that would not comply with this, to see what would be, what's
That's
getting
good.
hit
That's good.
by this specifically.
Yeah, one or two examples of that would be fantastic. Okay, I think before we move to opening up for motion, I do want to say though, conceptually, like the two main changes I think this is doing, one is creating this point incentive system versus just saying X% and here are some things that can cover, I think is a great innovation. Excited to see the city innovate and try this approach. I'm really supportive of it. And then, like I said, changing those thresholds in those zones seems like the other big change here. And I'm also supportive of that. So great work.
Thank you.
Anyone would like to make a motion on the continuance?
I can do it.
All right, thank you.
I move that we continue item number 2, development service request ordinance text amendments to Title 14 with regards to multifamily amenities, to give time for staff to provide the data that we've requested. Do I need to be more specific than that?
Do we need to say to the next meeting? Do you think you could have it by then, or do you want to give us a date to continue it to?
2 meetings might be good. There's a lot of data that's been requested.
Okay.
Right. Do we
I think we
need
did
to
2
say,
meetings.
do we need to say a date or can we just say until it's ready? Okay.
Okay. I think we're just going to leave it open-ended until city staff is
decide
ready.
that, yep.
Yep. Is there any?
I'll second it.
Second. All right. The motion now is a second. Any discussion on the motion? All right. Seeing as no discussion, I call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
I,
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. Motion passes unanimously. All right, we'll now move to item number 3 on our agenda. Ryan McCord requests project plan approval for 2 new flex industrial warehouses in the airport industrial zone located at 3155 West Center Street, Provo Bay. And we have the applicant, Ryan McCord. Is he here to make his presentation?
First staff.
Or Mary, sorry, staff, my apologies. First we'll invite staff to make the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. All right. All right. Quick context of the area. Like you said, it's 3155 West Center Street, which is on the way to the lake just west of us. You can see the zoning map there. It's kind of the only property zoned AI, which is airport industrial in the area. But you can see in that future land use map, it is planned in the future that everything kind of to the west of this property will probably follow in the same kind of footsteps of airport related uses. So this came before you guys last August 2023, and you approved that rezone and that concept plan at that time. It was about 4 warehouses back then. Now it's 2 warehouses with about 20 tenant units. Let's see, it went to the DRC last Thursday and they approved it. And associated with this project is also a subdivision plat to consolidate the little small properties there and split it into 2 different lots for the 2 different buildings. Both that plat and this plan have been approved by the CRC. All right, just some quick facts about the site plan here. It does have 3 loading docks, 8 units in building 1, 12 units in building 2. There are 3 accesses, one on Center Street, one on Lakeshore Drive, and one to the neighboring property for when that property eventually does develop. There'll be Jersey barriers placed there until that property develops, though, of course, to make sure no one is driving over there. A cross access and parking agreement will be established with the recording of the plat between lot 1 and lot 2 so that people can park and access, no matter what building they're kind of using. It meets parking, bike parking, lot coverage requirements. There are 6 dumpsters on the east side of the project that will be enclosed with a 6-foot block wall to make sure no one can see them, and they'll be surrounded by landscaping as well. Let's see, moving on to some of the landscaping. I just listed the landscaping codes that the applicant had to meet in order to meet the requirements of this area. There is a lot of them, so it's a pretty significant landscaping plan. One of the main ones was the design. I should have mentioned this is a design corridor. West Center Street is a design corridor. So in that code, it requires pretty significant landscaping along Center Street, of course, and the purpose being to improve the image of the city, preserve and enhance the character of Center Street, that kind of thing. So there's a 4-foot berm there, 4-foot high berm, and about 37 trees and 56 shrubs just on that like kind of highlighted green area. This is the second half of the site, building 2. Let's see. Some things I just wanted to mention here is that there is a loading dock on this south side, which is where Lakeshore Drive and Lakeview Parkway are. Of course, that's not the prettiest thing to be right there. So we've in the code, it says that evergreens are the best thing for screening and buffering. So we've required these 4 evergreens. There are limber pines down there, and then there's some maple trees and like a one other type of tree that's there specifically to make sure that that elevation of the property of the building isn't quite seen from Lakeview Parkway as people go to and from the airport. All the other, the store frontage areas of these 2 buildings look really good, but we just wanted to make sure that that was screened. This landscaping plan far outpaces the required amount of trees, the required amount of parking lot and perimeter parking lot landscaping. I did want to quickly touch on transitional landscaping buffers, which was in your staff report, just to hopefully preempt any questions that the public may have if they're here. So our code does require landscape buffers or transitional buffers between incompatible uses such as residential and industrial. Go back to this map. As you can see, just across the road here on the east side are residential homes, and they're planned to continue to be residential as shown on the future land use map. So in the code, it would require a, let's see, it would require like a 10-foot buffer zone with trees spaced every 25 feet and a shrub hedge. Instead, the applicant has provided, let's see, about, 37 trees as well as 215 shrubs with a 20-foot landscaping area. That's just up here, and that includes the parkway along here. So I mean, this is just a lot of landscaping in that area, which we really wanted to make sure was present because those residents are going to continue to be looking at this property, right? And then on the west side, you can see right here, it's currently an agricultural property. It's got a barn on it. There's no current residents there, and it's also planned to be something similar in the future. I mean, we even have an access that we required for that property. So we didn't require the transitional buffer standard on that side, even though it is a different zone. There's still going to be about 13 trees and 98 shrubs with a 10-foot yard. So there'll still be some landscaping. I think with if it was an actual residential home, it would also require like a 6-foot wall to block everything, but we're not going to be requiring that here for reasons I stated. Anyways, moving on. So quick elevations. It meets the design corridor requirements. There is the primary entrance is faced on Center Street. Building materials are primarily masonry, and they're broken up every few feet, which is required. It meets transparent glazing requirements on the street facades. One thing I wanted to also hopefully preempt any questions is the lighting of the project. There's not going to be any parking lot lighting. There's only going to be building mounted lighting. You can see the type of light. Oh, there you go. You can see the type of light right there, and you can kind of see it on the building as well. It's going to be directed downward and mostly used as security lighting at night. Let's see, both building one, this is building one, I should say. Both building one and building two, which is here, they are only about 30 feet from grade to those storefront parapets. And like the requirement is 35 feet. That's the maximum, I mean. So to put that in perspective, the surrounding zones have the same requirement of 35 feet tall. And then finally, this is the building two rendering. It also meets glazing requirements, I should say. One thing is that the design corridor code calls for gabled roofs unless the DRC and the Planning Commission provide their approval for a flat roof. So the DRC did provide their approval for a flat roof last Thursday. And here's that final view of the building. The staff does recommend approval for this. I mean, warehouses are a permitted use. This looks like a great warehouse. They've gone above and beyond on the landscaping. We believe that they've really thought about the transitional buffers here. The applicant has family that lives on the east side of the road there. So he's very sensitive to what they're going to be feeling about this development. We think this is a great addition to the area to provide more support services to the airport going forward, as mentioned in the general plan. Any questions?
I do.
Commissioner?
Can you go back to the one right before the facades?
This one?
No, keep going. Right there.
Yeah.
Does there not need to be a sidewalk along Lakeview Parkway on that side?
There isn't currently a sidewalk there, so we're not requiring the sidewalk there. The engineers didn't require it, at least, so.
I'm interested to know the justification for that, because there's sidewalks north of Center Street on that side of Lakeview Parkway. seems like it would be logical to start to fill in that sidewalk as we develop it out. Do we know why engineering's not?
That's a
Worried
great
about it?
question. I wonder if David Day, who's here, would know the answer.
Yeah, so that side of Lakeview Parkway, we hadn't anticipated having the sidewalk on it. We have the
The bike trails on the other side.
combined trail bike path on the other side of the road. And so that wasn't something that was anticipated on this side, so.
Okay.
I'd like to add to that question because further east on Lakeview Parkway, every development on the north side of the street has been asked to put a sidewalk along there, and
Yeah,
it
coming
seems,
down because it's all residential.
but
and then when we
even
get
when they
into-
back onto it, it just seems like we might regret that we don't have a continuous sidewalk right there.
It's a big road to
we
cross just
could
to get
ask,
to the sidewalk on the other side. right?
yeah, if you've come from Lakeview Parkway all along where it's been developed and the sidewalk's been created, then there's not a light where Lakeshore and Lakeview meet. It's kind of a precarious intersection for a pedestrian or a bike to cross.
Yeah, that's true. We can take a look at that and reevaluate that.
Okay.
I had another question.
Yes, Commissioner Jensen.
I have a few questions about some of the design. Are the driveways and the lots sufficient sizes to allow the access for these backing, like for people backing out and for the large trucks going around? It looks like it's a small area, but maybe that's just because there's large empty spaces that normally we would see filled with parking spots.
Makes sense. So are you asking, is there enough like backing space like up here, for example, if a truck is going around? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, if they have to go all the way from Center Street or Lakeshore, all the way around backside to that south side of the property that you described as that where the loading bays.
Mm-hmm.
So there's loading docks on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so maybe when you come up, just know that that's something I want to make sure, because in the rendering here, it shows them pulling up alongside, but usually I see semis backing into one of those loading docks. So just to understand that there's enough room for that to take place without it being impassable by other traffic that's trying to get out of their parking spots, for example.
Mm-hmm.
My other question for you is, why is there a requirement to have a gabled roof? And then what would be the disadvantages of having a flat roof that we should be aware of before we give it the thumbs up or down?
I actually have the code right here. So it says hipped or gabled roof. So this is the design corridor code. It's not, this would only apply to things on this Center Street. Any other AI. It sounds so weird to say. Airport industrial zone would just have a flat roof if they wanted. So it says hipped or gabled roofs shall be required, provided that flat roofs with decorative front parapet walls may be permitted upon review and approval by the Planning Commission or Design Review Committee. So I guess it says or. So Design Review Committee did look at it and approved it, but it's also coming to you guys. So they do have those decorative front parapet walls.
On the north side?
Yeah, well, anywhere where there is storefronts, they have those little parapets popping out.
And the way you just read the code says that that's a suitable substitution for a gable there?
Yeah, provided that flat roofs with decorative front parapet walls may be permitted upon review. You
Okay.
guys and DRC.
Because I do have kind of a concern about if we've got this design review process for this corridor and they've gone to such lengths to have beautiful landscaping along it to make it a nice north facade, should we then just look the other way that the building's very plain, you know?
Mhm.
It is a warehouse and by
Yeah.
nature shouldn't be fancy, but we do have all these overlays to make sure that
Things can be a little bit fancier.
it's nicer on one side at least, you know?
Right,
So
yeah.
I'm just, thank you for helping me understand that.
Mhm.
All right. I think we're good. Thank
Cool.
you so much. I'd like to invite the applicant, Ryan McCord, to come forward. You will have 15 minutes for your presentation. When your time is up, you will hear a ding and the microphone will be muted. Following your presentation, if you have questions, we will invite you forward and ask them. Thank you.
Thank you. Here we go. Okay, yeah, my name's Ryan McCord. I'm the applicant. Oh my goodness, what am I doing? Oh my goodness, I'm just trying to get us past this. There we go. I was going the wrong way. All right. So, kind of get started. We're the greenhouse people down there, right? That's what we are. We're not developers. Kind of what happened is the city came together and we decided we're going to build Lakeview Parkway, which really chopped off that piece that we're talking about off the rest of our property. You can see the greenhouses down there. And so at one point, you know, the thought was that at some point this will all be greenhouses. And by doing that, it's kind of separated it, and it's a busy road, right? And so the idea of actually having greenhouses on there is not really feasible. And so, but we've had people come to us and say, hey, we'd love to buy your land. I don't know. That's all of Southwest Provo right now. And so we had a lot of huge developers come to us and say, hey, we'd love to do something. We'd love to do something. But we felt that, hey, we can do this ourselves. And so that's kind of what we're doing with that piece, that will never be greenhouses. Kind of going, so your question, here, oh man, I'm struggling. There we go. Okay, so your question, as far as the semi trucks, you can see here, it's actually been engineered. We have these circles are kind of the trailer lines of what they'll go. And we've talked to Public Works and they've said that, you know, this looks good. As well as, I think that, I don't know if you guys have been down by the Provo Airport, very similar building to what we're building, the big Binky Bro sign there. And what we're building here is not necessarily super duper industrial warehouses. That's not a very technical term. But what we're building is kind of a flex space that I do think that the front of these can be utilized as retail space that some of these businesses can come in and have. Right now, I think kind of to preempt any questions, right now on the front piece is a rock quarry that has a lot of semis coming in and out of the property. What we anticipate is actually a lot less big trucks coming in. I think the biggest kind of trucks we're going to, it's a lot, you know, we're catering towards an e-commerce type business. A lot of the biggest trucks that will be coming in are FedEx and UPS trucks. The loading docks are really only going to be used to bring in the beginnings of their business, right? The stuff that they need to stock at first. And then after that, we don't anticipate them being used all that often. And so we don't actually anticipate a whole lot of heavy truck traffic going through here. It's going to be mostly be FedEx and UPS stuff. I grew up in the area actually, and I'm trying to, let's go back to, and so right here is actually my father's house. And so we are sympathetic to the idea that, yeah, this is warehousing. We don't, you know, love that it's right here next to all this residential housing, but we believe that, you know, this is what the city has designated as the area that we can do warehousing. And so that's the reason we're doing it. If I could snap my fingers and no more development ever happened down there, I'd love it. You know, I love it down there. It's a beautiful area, but it's just not realistic. And the reality is either we're going to have to build this or we're going to have to sell the property and have somebody else, and they're going to want to develop them themselves. So that's my presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ryan?
I have a question. Do you have tenants already signed or lined up?
No, we don't have any tenants currently.
Any other questions?
Can we see the landscaping along the Center Street stretch again?
Right there. Oh. There we go.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so that's where the 4-foot berm is there, and then trees and plantings and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
And in talking with our landscape architect, he expressed that this is a lot more than he typically sees, that this is a higher requirement than he typically sees.
I would agree. That's very lush.
Yeah.
We're a greenhouse, man.
I like it. I like it.
The McCords have to do it.
Thank you, Mr. McCord.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're good for now. All right, I'm going to open the meeting for public comments. When your time is up, you'll hear a ding and microphone will be muted. Each person may make one comment. If we have questions, we will invite you to speak at a microphone at that time. This time is for comments only. If you have any questions about an item, please speak with staff privately. Public comments are now open. You will have 2 minutes to make each comment. Please state your name and city of record for the record, or your city of residence for the record. I think your microphone's off.
The light is on.
Okay.
Quinn Peterson in Provo. I'm here for a different project, but I am actually on the design review committee, and so we did just review this, and our architects and our team were pleased with this, and we were also a part of creating the design standard for that corridor, and we all were really happy with the project and didn't have any concerns. Just for the record.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other public comments before we close the public comment period? If there are any neighborhood district chairs, you're also welcome to come forward. Seeing no further comments, we'll now close public comments and open it up to a discussion among the Planning Commission. Commissioners. Commissioner DeSoto, look like you want to say something.
I think it's really nice, and I thought the same thing about the landscaping. It's like, yeah, because they're a greenhouse. I used to buy plants there. I know, I was sad about it. Yeah, I think it looks really nice. I like that they use brick, and I hope that this actually, I mean, I know you said it'll be e-commerce, but I also hope that there might be some businesses that the neighborhood over there would enjoy having. I don't know what that would look like, but I hope that that need will be fulfilled by these smaller storefronts that also can serve as like doing pickup orders and stuff like that, hopefully. So I think it's promising.
Thank you. Commissioner Jensen, sorry, Commissioner Kendall.
I like the project as well, and I think it's great that the owners live across the street. That really ensures that this is going to be nice and kept up well, and they've got a vested interest in this, and it makes me happy that they could do something like this.
Thank you. Commissioner Hill?
Yeah, I really like it too. Love the landscaping. I mean, being in the airport protection zone, this is the kind of thing that's going to be there, right? My only question would be on the sidewalk. There's the remaining issue.
I agree with that as well. I feel strongly about the sidewalk.
On this sidewalk point, Commissioner Pepperoni, what's the best way to handle this type of feedback?
This is a site plan. If that's something you would recommend, engineering can take a look at that. It'll ultimately be a decision about Public Works, but certainly can make that recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Is anyone interested in making a motion? Sounds like generally positive feedback from the commission.
I'll make a motion. I move that we approve the project plan from item number 3. Applicant Ryan McCord requests project plan approval for 2 new flex industrial warehouses in the AI zone located at 3155 West Center Street, with the conditions that a final subdivision plat is approved and recorded, a flat roof is permitted after review, and that Public Works recommend that Public Works look at the sidewalk situation.
I'll second.
Any discussion on the motion?
It says all items of the staff report as a condition. And were there any other things we missed in that motion?
I should say that I used to work for a different city, and we'd always put that on as anything we missed. But I sent in the staff report, and then Aaron said, "Don't put that on," so you don't have to say
All
that.
right, disregard.
Sorry about that.
Did we mention
Great
the
question.
sidewalk?
I had the same question, Commissioner Jensen. Thank you.
Sorry, did we mention the sidewalk comment on that?
Yes.
You
Okay.
did. Yep. All right. Seeing as we have a motion, let's vote on it. Commissioner Shin.
Aye.
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 And I will also vote aye. Item number 3 passes unanimously. I will now call for a 5-minute break for those who may need it. So we will reconvene at 7:20, so 6 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think it. Oh, that was, yeah, me too. Too cold, yeah. It makes me so happy that they get to keep it and do something on it. Because usually they just sell it and then it's gone forever. And then it's great. And it continues to tie their family to it. It's really, I think it's great. Yeah, thank you. It's a legacy piece. It's nice. And they can certainly put up a lot of trees. Well, they won't be big warehouse, huge trucks, so.
I want to know, like, I was gonna ask a question.
What were you gonna ask?
The loading docks are only on that, so what about units 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 here? Like, they don't have access to those, they're all separated, so. All of them. Loading docks. I just have a house. There and back. So what's the point of the loading dock? So maybe it's just for those here. It's just. Because the layout didn't show up that way, so I guess I could be interior. I guess what purpose is what's the point of loading dock?
Well, it's a concept.
This is not even real loading docks, though. They're not even sunk in or whatever.
They're not the kind you back into.
They're just garage doors.
But there are some elevated ones.
Or are
That's
they?
what Lisa's point is, but only.
No,
Yeah.
only the ones on the.
I think there are businesses that don't really need it, though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It just seems silly to have, I guess you would just say this one has access to a loading dock.
Yeah, if you just charge more lease rate because it has one.
Did you guys love? Variance. Like everything is for staff, so for.
Yeah. She does good work.
All right, we're gonna get started again here. Well, I gave everyone one more minute, so we'll wait for Director Pepperoni to come back, but just giving you a heads up, we're gonna get going. All right. Okay, so we're going to move to item number 4, Development Services request approval for an update to Provo City's Water Master Plan. And I believe the city staff is coming to present on that. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. I'm Barry Prettyman. I'm the engineer with the Water Resources Group. Let's see if I can actually do this thing right. So we came a couple weeks ago to talk about the Water Master Plan. We gave a brief overview, and we're going to, I guess, continue on that tonight. Just a small recap. This has to go before City Council. Obviously, before that, we have to get a recommendation from the Planning Commission. So we're looking for that tonight. Again, just to recap what we talked about last time with you commissioners is, so we're doing a Water Master Plan. You can see that highlighted in red, the box there at the very top, orange. That is a document that we're seeking to get approval from the council and recommendation from the commission. We've been working on this for a couple of years with Bolin Collins, who's our consultant that's been helping us out with this. So it's been a long process, and we produced a very riveting, intriguing document. I'm sure you've all looked at it with wonder and amazement. So what we did is we really looked around the city to see projected growth, because we wanted to plan accordingly. So if there's areas that have higher growth than others, we want to make sure that we can get water and fire flow to those areas. So we focused on several areas around the city to pay special attention to, so we can make sure that we get enough water to those areas. So this is kind of an overview of those areas and projected growth. We do expect a lot of growth in the next 50 years or so. So one of the key important things was we wanted to make sure that we were having our water supply match the densities that we were going to see. So we worked a lot with the development planning to make sure that we understood what the population and densities were going to look like in those areas. Like I said, this plan did take us about 2 years in the making. So we did need to finish it and get it going. So there are a few areas that didn't have adopted plans, some potential changes that we'll have to make. But we just needed to get the document done and moving forward. So we probably will have to make a few changes to this in a little bit, as those northeast and these mall areas, we see those plans for those neighborhoods and those developments in those areas. And we do update this about every 5 years. So it is kind of a document that we revisit because things just change constantly. You can see in this graph here, we're talking about projected demand for water. We showed those 2 lines. One would be as if we were just going on our current use, and then one that we set as like a conservation goal. So the blue one there is if we followed the state conservation goal and projected with our future population, what our demands would look like. And so we looked at our reservoirs, tanks, wells, and looked at our future population to understand what that was going to look like. So we did a supply and demand master plan. And just we made some conclusions as we were looking at that. We've seen in the last 30 years or so, we have steadily falling aquifer, or our groundwater just keeps dropping and dropping. So that's the bad news. The good news is those that we do have things that are coming online in the next few years here, where we talk about this MAR, Managed Aquifer Recharge, or ASR. They're kind of the same thing, but we have a plan going forward that we have surface water that we can put into the ground to help combat those lowering groundwater levels. And so that is our recommendation as we're going forward, is to take advantage of those, the infrastructure to help bolster our groundwater. So we are currently actually in the construction of a new treatment facility. We have several locations. The one that's in the most, I guess, spotlight right now is in Rock Canyon. We're doing work up there. And then we have some wells that we're going to have to construct as well for future use. We also looked at all of our storage tanks that we have around the city. For the most part, we're doing pretty well. There's a few very old tanks up by the MTC, up by the Provo Provo Temple. We said they're in fair condition. They are very old. They're still functioning. The reason we say fair is that they're just getting to the end of their service life. And then there's a a tank up in Rock Canyon that we believe has to have a little more storage in it to provide for growth in that area. We think we looked at it and we actually think we need a little more storage in that. The other thing we did as part of the study was a storage and conveyance plan. And so you can see these green dots. Each of those green dots represents a place where we have like a meter or a use for that water. Green and blue are good, but yellow and orange, we start to get below the pressures that we would like to see as a city. So on the left, you can see that's our current system. We have a few areas where we can see some orange and yellow, where we'd like to improve that. And then on the right, we projected into the future, showing if we kept our system the same, as if we didn't make any improvements to our tanks or to our pipeline, and we built out, that's what that image on the right is. And then we obviously would have some areas that are well below what we would like to see. Red, and then the black is something that we would just never want to see. So we want to avoid that. So the part of this storage and conveyance plan is to recommend projects so that we can avoid that. So we have a list of projects that are included in this master plan that will address these areas where we could have future issues. And we run the model again. I just wanted to show these two pictures next to each other so you can see what it looked like without any improvements, and then what it would look like in the future with improvements. And again, that's a build out. So these improvements would be well out into the future. It would provide sufficient pressures and water supply for the foreseeable future and for a long time. One of the main things that we do as we talk about in this storage and conveyance plan is the age of our current pipeline. So in those previous projects, those are new projects to meet future demands. But we also look at our existing pipelines and realize that we also have to do some projects to replace those as well, because they just reach a useful age or their useful life, and we just have to replace them. We have crews that go around and fix leaks so we can identify areas that we need to replace. So if you look on that picture on the right that shows all of the different colors there, yellow is getting pretty close to the end of useful life, and red is into it, well beyond it. And there are a few areas where it's black, where we have some pipe that's over 76 to over 100 years old. We have some really old pipe throughout the city. So we also identify these areas and think, that we need to identify replacement of these pipes. And so we have these numbers in here. This one is that preferred annual investment is just to replace pipes if we were to do that over those 60 years. Like that's what we're trying to say. If the pipeline was, the life of it was about 60 years, we'd need to invest about $18.2 million a year to make sure that we stayed on top of that and replace these pipes as they're getting to the end of their life. And then these are the 10-year improvements. These are related to those projects that we need to do for future growth. And so a lot of these projects are actually already in place or already going. Like those MAR, the treatment facility and the infiltration facilities, we have actually started on those. And like those on the right there, we do have a lot of grant money that we've gotten from the state, from FEMA, to actually help cover some of these costs. And then on this one, it kind of shows the range that we recommend for improvement, or sorry, range of costs for these improvements. and rehabilitation of existing pipes. And again, that's just another table that kind of shows those same costs, that just break it down a little further. I actually think we've gone past, I forgot, these are slides that we were showing past, but so we go through each of these projects and recommend costs for each of them and costs that are, I guess, in today's dollars. So again, this is something we have to do every 5 years. We have to prepare for the future. So we look at demands and the general plan, future demands. We try and make a plan so that we can address issues that may arise as these things progress. So I'm just going to leave this time for any questions that you have or any comments.
Thank you, Mr. Prettyman. Any questions from the commission?
I do.
Commissioner Jensen?
I saw that huge number. It was like 105 million on the second line, the MAR improvements or the MAR facility. That last slide you had on there, is that for the new water treatment facility that's down on Freedom Boulevard?
Yeah, so there's several projects that make up that MAR. So there is the treatment plant that's on Freedom Boulevard, and that one's about 105 million. Then we have part of that same project is a booster station that's up near the temple. That's why they've on that Temple View Drive, they've torn up the road there. That's where a new booster station will go, and that's about $15 million. And then there's another project that puts a pipeline up Rock Canyon. So total, those projects are about 130.
So those are all infrastructure improvements that are mainly for that aquifer recharge program?
Yes.
How does, maybe this is less, I want to understand how that works because I've heard a lot of talk about how that's going to save our water supply. And I know that aquifers are not actually physical structures underground. They're just groundwater that's somehow sort of in the same location that we have access to, right? So how do you transport the water from the ground sources that you have to these aquifers? And how does it stay contained so that we know it's a safe, usable, like it's not going to drain out into some other drained aquifer system that belongs to somebody else's water rights?
Right. Yep. So we've done a lot of pilot studies. So let me first explain too. So we're not actually taking groundwater and putting it into the ground. We actually have Provo River water rights that are very old, and we're going to start using those. We will put that into the treatment plant. We will treat it to drinking water standards. So then we can actually use our existing drinking water system. So we don't have to build as much pipe as we would need to
send it up to
raw water. So it will go into our drinking water system, use existing pipelines. We had to add a few new pipelines to get to where we wanted it. And it will send it up and put it into the ground in Rock Canyon. So we also have some other sites, but Rock Canyon is the best one that we've identified so far. And
you literally just like it's like running a hose in your backyard till it soaks in, or
Yes.
like, how do you know where to put it and
Right.
that it's going to stay put?
So that's what I kind of lost my train of thought, but I'm getting back to it. So we did studies. It's probably been 5 or 7 years that we've been doing these studies. We worked with Bar Engineering to identify locations where we could put water into the ground. And so Rock Canyon was identified as a great area. We actually have 2 places where we measured water as it was coming down through the Rock Canyon Creek bed. And we were estimating close to 20 CFS of water into
So you
the
knew
ground.
it was seeping in there.
So we knew it was going in. Another thing that we did was we drilled pilot wells. They're just small diameter holes that we drilled into the ground, several hundred feet into the ground. And so when we put water into the ground, we could actually watch as that water rose in those wells. Now, what it'll do is it'll actually rise, and then it'll put enough pressure in that to actually kind of push it out, and it pushes it out into different parts in that area. So we had wells, our own wells that we were using, that we use now. We can measure the water levels in there. And then we had these new wells, these test wells that we put in the ground just to see where that water was going. And it's pretty localized in that Rock Canyon area, which is where we have a lot of our drinking water wells.
So if you divert water from a river source, for example, and put it back up in the mountains so that it seeps back through, how do you know you're not robbing an end user somewhere else?
So that's part of the state water rights. The good thing is that we do have water rights and the state has recognized that they are valid. There are some things that we do need to work out with some other entities, but we have done a lot of collaboration with Utah Lake, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Central Utah Water Conservancy District. We've done a lot of legwork to get this going, and we have all the parties on board. They understand what we're going to do. They also understand that we do have these rights. So we've made sure that we're not going to affect anyone downstream from us.
And I'm not criticizing the plan. I'm trying to wrap my head around it because the whole
Right.
idea of putting water in the ground and trusting that it's going to be there when I need it, if it's just seeping in anyway, is mind-boggling to me. So,
Right. The other thing that will be neat too is that we can, so the other thing that we can do is the water treatment plant can actually serve as our source. So instead of running wells, we can actually, what we've been saying is we can idle the wells and the water can actually recharge. So instead of us pumping every year and the wells just keep going down, we can run the treatment plant and not run the wells, and they can fill naturally that way too.
cool. Thank you.
Commissioner Shin, did you have?
Oh yeah, just so I can understand this too. Basically, the concept of this is this is a project for water storage that doesn't require building new tanks. It's just using the aquifer as our storage and refilling that through
Right,
the
so
river.
yeah, the MAR projects that we're talking about, yes. The master plan is kind of an overall.
Yeah. But this specifically, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was yeah.
I wanted to say this is a lot of work. Good job. Thank you. We really appreciate it. I think it's really great the city's putting this plan together. I think it's really, really important. I missed the first meeting that we talked about this, so I apologize. I just have a couple questions to kind of retread some ground. The scope of this master plan, like for example, I don't see like pricing or water conservation strategies. Is that going to be in like a separate plan?
Yeah, and if we go back to that very first slide, I don't know how to go backwards. Okay, if you go back to that very first slide, the state actually does require that we do conservation plans.
Okay.
So if you look on the yellow group there, there's a conservation plan that is required by the state.
Got it.
The state has reviewed it and they didn't have any comments. So that is something I believe that we will have to get adopted by city council. We just haven't gotten there yet.
So this conservation plan, we have one that is reviewable.
Yeah.
It just hasn't been adopted by city council.
Yep.
And it hasn't come through the planning commission yet, correct?
Not yet. Yep, not yet. It's just, we've gotten it done and we sent it to the state. They replied back. I think they actually had comments the first time, so we replied back. And then, yeah, we just need to present that to the planning commission and city council after that.
Okay, amazing. I just have two questions. And it's just simple, dumb questions, but what uses groundwater?
So for our drinking water, we have in Provo, we really have three sources, but the two main sources that we have in Provo are springs that are up on the mountainside. Some of them are even up Provo Canyon. And then the other one is wells. And so we have it's basically a pipe that goes deep into the ground.
So most of our drinking water is coming from groundwater. It's not
Yes.
coming from the river or springs.
Yeah, up to this point, we haven't used we have used some surface water, but it's very little amount. Most of it is from springs or groundwater.
And I guess I should say not drinking water, but potable water. So the
Yeah.
same water I'm
Yeah.
using for my
Potable
lawn.
water, drinking water is kind of the same.
Same, yeah.
Same
So the
thing.
same thing I'm using for my lawn, my dishes, all that stuff.
Yep. So for the winter, most of the time we can just go, we can actually get along with just our springs. But in the summer, the demand gets so high that it outstrips the spring capacity. And so we'll turn on the wells and that pulls water from the groundwater.
So the reason why I asked the question is just to sort of hit home the point that like planning around recharging this aquifer is really important. It's a critical source for our livelihood.
Yep. And we've seen that. We've seen it just going down. So we want to make sure that we can kind of reverse the trend.
One thing I wasn't fully able to understand is so I saw the chart where different areas, the way, how many feet has gone down, but I don't understand like as a percent.
I don't know the percentage either, but we've seen in some wells close to 100 feet of drop.
Do we know how big they are or how much water feet there are there in these on
We
average?
really
or-
don't.
We don't. Okay.
Most of the time in our city, our wells are anywhere from like 300 to 500 feet deep. In some of those wells, though, we had to actually lower the well because we were out of the water. So we actually, in some of the wells, we couldn't pump anymore because we were out of the water. But I think it's only been 2 that we've had to do that.
Okay. The last question I had, were you going to ask something about?
Just gonna ask where were those located, those two?
I can't remember off the top of my head. I just know we've had a few where we've had to do that.
Okay. Last question I have is just what is the risk on 100-year pipes?
Well, it's just with age, and in some places in the city, there's soil that's more corrosive. The risk is that we'll just get holes in the pipe and we will lose water. It will just.
So it's just water loss. There's not
It's
like
water-
health concerns or anything along those lines.
Well, there can be health concerns where, the pipe is breaking. You can get
Seepage.
soil in the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You can have road damage, property damage, infrastructure damage besides the water line. Because there's pretty high pressures in some parts of the city. If that pipe breaks, it can be quite a bit of damage.
Makes sense. Any other questions for Mr. Prettyman? Nope.
Yeah.
All right.
I have one more question.
Commissioner Lewis.
Those black ones on the map that show the really old pipes, do you wait for signs of damage or do you just put those at the top of your maintenance list and start replacing them?
So yeah, we do have like we have a loose maintenance and replacement plan. And most of the time right now is that we're finding that we're just being reactionary. And the only time that we know that it's leaking is whether it makes the surface, it surfaces on a road
Right.
or in a yard.
Is that,
So-
do I remember correctly that there was some sort of a timeline of a tier? This one's more important to address quickly, this like an A, B, and C level of urgency, or does this map just serve as that as you plan your maintenance?
Yeah, it's hard because sometimes we'll just get a line that may not be as old, but it's having problems. So-
Well, it
so
makes
our-
sense
our
to be
priority
it makes
changes,
sense
yeah.
to be reactionary on those, but I'm wondering if the
Our
plan
priority-
addresses
yeah.
any prioritizing of
Our pri-
replacement.
Our priority would be to fix the oldest ones first and then work our way through the oldest ones first.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate.
Thanks.
We're going to open the meeting to public comments. Given that we have not had public comments, I'm not going to read the thing, but okay, we do. You're a neighborhood chair, correct?
I am, but I
You want
just
3
wanted on the
minutes?
record my name's Sharon Mehmet, and I just wanted on the record, as you mentioned, being reactionary, we have a problem up on Mojave Lane that we've mentioned multiple times. We have a recurring sinkhole, which to our way of thought means that there's a water line problem. So now it's in the record. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further public comments? All right, seeing no further public comments, I will now close public comments and we will discuss the item as a commission. Commissioners, any?
I feel like what they presented to us a couple weeks ago and today just shows that they're looking at this, they understand the demands and the use, and it sounds like they're taking smart, organized efforts to maintain and keep up with it. They have an idea of what it will cost. Whether or not they're getting that amount of money is irrelevant to the plan. That's something for them to ask, but I have no problems with passing the plan on to the city council.
I'm really grateful for the knowledge we were able to gain from this about what we need to worry about, and maybe there are ways that we can, especially with the conservation plan coming up, things to keep in mind. And so I think this is really thorough and really helpful.
I think I would, yeah, I agree with those statements. I know that as we discussed, the conservation plan is a separate item coming down the road, but I feel like I'd be interested to, I don't know, just think about some of the questions as we look at projected growth in the city, the numbers of in 10, 20 years, how much water are we going to need to design for, build for? I know that like here in Utah, we have a lot of, it's an arid climate, it's very dry. My understanding is that a lot of water use, like, municipal water usage in Utah, I don't know the specifics of Provo, but goes to things like lawn irrigation, landscaping, all that kind of stuff. Which, to me, it seems like that does seem relevant to these questions about, the future growth, how much we need. Do we at least if it comes down, I think we should talk about, like water conservation efforts, especially with landscaping and stuff. I don't know if we have as a city, if we have plans for for example, like an incentive program for xeriscaping for low water usage, drought friendly landscaping. I mean, I guess maybe a question again, do we know what the percentages of how much, with our the municipal water usage, how much does that go to, cooking, showering versus just like landscape irrigation?
The percentage is difficult, but we do see, winter rates are, when we go to the winter, we can tell that's the indoor use. So because no one's using anything outside.
Yeah.
When you see that summer, a real big jump. I think we go from, anywhere from 10 to 20 million gallons a day to nearly sometimes 40 million gallons a day in the summer. And, it's because of irrigation.
So
Yeah, I mean,
it could-
that's was the telling to me is what you said was like, we're basically good living off our springs in the winter. And then once we water our lawns, we're depleting our aquifer.
To Mr. Shin's question, I know that the Conservation and Resiliency Plan that we passed recently and the Rivers and Lake Shores Plan, probably the Canyons and Hillsides Plan too, they all had elements of this, these goals in them. So there's intent written into some of these guiding documents, even though there's not like language that's restricting it just yet to various degrees, if that's helpful to know.
And we
Thanks.
do have some incentive programs. If we have our own kind of, Provo City has its own kind of flip the strip, that we do provide incentives and reimbursements if you qualify for those. So
Can you indulge me just one more question and then
Sure.
I'll move this along, I promise. You're an expert in this field. Do you live in Provo?
I actually live in Lehigh.
You live in Provo. Well, anyway, you're a Utahn. How do you feel about Provo's water future? Like, do you feel like we're on top of this plan and I'm really confident about our water future, or are you concerned? And the reason why I ask is like, when I see the plan, I'm like, you put a lot of work into this. It looks reasonable, but these costs are very, very, very expensive. And the fact that our water, you're telling me that the water has gone down 100 feet in some wells and they're 400 feet. I mean, it's a little concerning, but this is just, I'm not an expert. So I'm curious.
So yeah, these things are concerning and that's why we're looking at it. But I feel like what we're doing is a great step in the right direction. We have plenty of water rights to make up for some of these deficits that we're seeing. This new treatment plant is going to be amazing for the city, where we'll be able to utilize all of our water rights instead of just groundwater. So we're taking a step in the right direction, and it is in a direction that some cities don't have the luxury of, where they just have groundwater, or they have to go to another entity like Central Utah or another group like that and actually purchase water, because if they don't have water, they have to go buy it.
How much does the utilization of our water rights impact things like Utah Lake, for example? Like if we took all of our water rights out of the river, does that then affect Utah Lake?
Yeah, and that gets pretty complicated.
Or is it just
we could talk for a
minuscule?
long time about it. Sorry, what were you saying?
I was saying, or is it just negligible in the grand scheme of things?
The state does set up, like with Provo River, if we're in a drought, they will limit some of the withdrawals so that they can make sure that Utah
see.
Lake and all the users are whole downstream. But if we're in a drought, then really like everybody's taking cuts to make sure that
Makes
you know
sense.
that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Can we make a motion? Are we good?
I will happily make a motion. I move that we forward a positive recommendation to the city council for the zone map amendment requested. Wait a minute, I'm looking at number 5. Woo! That we forward a positive recommendation to municipal council for this Provo Public Works requests approval of a general plan amendment for an update to Provo City's water master plan.
Do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second.
Any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing no discussion, let's vote.
Aye.
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 I,
And I vote aye. That item passes unanimously. All right, the next two items, 5 and 6, we are going to read in together and be presented unanimously, but we will vote separately on them. So we have item number 5, Jamie Chapman requests a zone map amendment from the OSPR, Open Space Preservation Recreation Zone, to the MDR, Medium Density Residential Zone, in order to build 24 new townhomes located approximately at 5544 North River One Drive. And then item 6, Jamie Chapman requests project plan approval for phase 2 of the River District Residential Project, building 24 additional townhomes over 3.18 acres in a proposed MDR zone. Mr. Armoire will present on behalf of the city for this item, these
Okay.
two items.
Thank you. You should be familiar with this area by now. There's been a lot to get us there. So you've seen general plan changes come in, you've seen the zone change and concept plan, and then the project plan for phase 1 on the residential. And now we're just back for phase 2 on the residential piece. So you could see there, the highlighted area just was recently brought into Provo from Orem. And that's why it's zoned the OSPR, because that's the default for when property is brought in through annexation, or in this case, a boundary line adjustment with another city. So we are here to look at the request of MDR zone. As you could see on the previous slide, that matches what was given on phase 1. And on this slide, you could see how the actual site plan works with the two phases. The connections for the parking, local traffic, and the pedestrian facilities are all interconnected through the two phases, as you saw in the original overall concept plan last year, I believe. Here's a zoom in of that phase 2. So again, it's 24 units. The townhome apartment, they'll be retained by the property owner as rental units. You could see that the pedestrian trail, which was a very big point in phase 1 and continues to be in phase 2. Pedestrian trail along Provo River is shown, and you'll note in the staff report that is currently in a draft in a development agreement to be shown in front of the city council to be adopted with the rezone request. It meets the standards. The plan itself meets the MDR zone. There wasn't any issue with design standards or parking or anything like that. Landscaping is all met. We did have one public comment that you saw forwarded to you from Mr. Robert Hammond. Basically just describing the desire, the need to make sure that that river trail does become part of the approval. And I think that is covered. I think there's no risk of that not being a part of it. So that is all I have. I know that's quick for 2 items, but I'll try to answer any specific questions you have.
Any questions for Mr. Armoire?
We do have a representative from the development team here as well.
Great. Okay.
I always wait 2 seconds to see if someone jumps in first. My first initial reaction was, holy cow, they're changing open space and so I appreciate when I read that was not something to be alarmed about because it's just part of the process. But I do have questions about the open space designation. So even though the zone doesn't need to be open space, the general plan still does show, a general area of open space that we expect to have along the river. And at what point do we become alarmed that we're allowing development to encroach on a geographic area? Like at what point, how do we determine how close is too close for development to go into that open space area? Because if you were to overlay their plan on the general plan map shown here, I think it would encroach, especially on that north end. It's very close to the river. Is that just something we say, oh, they're building a trail, so it makes it public space anyway? Or how do we determine that doesn't go against our objective to have general plan designation of open space in the first place?
Okay, yeah, there's a couple different parts to that, I think. The first is typically in Provo City, the standard is 100-foot setback from the river, which can be reduced down to 40. This specific case is a little different as it was taken through the approval process in Orem. We respected that as we brought it into Provo City. So you could see that some of those buildings are a little closer than 40 feet. However, there is sufficient space. The main concern with getting closer than the 40 feet is maintenance, to be honest, maintenance of the facility. So Public Works Engineering reviewed this plan and found it sufficient for what is being proposed. So there's that part of it, right? There's the kind of the code standard. The other part of it is kind of this visionary thing that you're talking about with the general plan. The visionary thing with the general plan is all along Provo River, you'll see in the updated map is that green. We want to kind of push that to make sure people know that we're not going to be turning our backs on the river anymore in Provo. We're going to be addressing it, using it as an amenity. And if you look at this site plan, I think they've done a great job of that.
Okay, so you feel like it still meets the intent of that line, even though it's crossing into it.
Right.
Okay. The other part is maybe just for me to understand. I know that people can't own the river, but how do you have a parcel that spreads to both sides, and where does their ownership of that parcel end in relation to the riverbank?
You could kind of see the property line there.
Because it goes to the other
yeah, it
side. So
does.
like, how does that look in reality? That maybe is how it's platted, but how does it look in reality as far as what's actually theirs?
Yeah, legally, I don't know how to answer that question. I don't-
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I remember on the property that's to the southeast of here, when we gave them permission to have it closer than 100 feet to the river for the same reasons
Right.
that it was not going to turn their back on the river essentially. But this is the first time I've seen one that crosses over.
And I'm
Would there
sure
be
there's-
developable space on that eastern portion of the river, or is that just amenity space that they happen to own?
Well, that's an Orem still. So time will tell.
Oh,
But I don't
okay.
think it's developable because it would be in the river setback. So I don't think it's developable.
Because it's so close.
If it were in Provo, but it's not in Provo, it's in Orem.
Right.
And theirs is different than ours. They can be closer. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we'd like to invite the applicant or representative of James Chapman to present. You will have 15 minutes for your presentation. When your time is up, you will hear a ding and the microphone will be muted. Following your presentation, if we have questions, we'll ask. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jim Ivory. I'm here for Jamie Chapman this evening. Really, this is a landlocked parcel that was in Orem, and as we accumulated the property, the only way that it could be developed was through by acquiring the surrounding land and doing one development. We've gone through the process with both Orem and Provo on through the entitlement process. In fact, we have an executed development agreement with both cities. Guaranteeing that we will put that public trail through and that there will be a public easement, et cetera. We've gone through planning commission as far as looking at the architecture, et cetera. So really, it made a lot of sense to bring these 3 acres over, and we're very appreciative that councils in both cities worked with us, and that we were able to not have a funky city line running through the middle of the future neighborhood. So really, I didn't have a big presentation because we've been through it before. The reason we are here is we need to come for a project plan approval, which is a discretionary action. We have to come before planning commission, in order to pull a building permit and to build these 24 units. And really, I'm here tonight in case there's any additional questions on history, how we got here, et cetera.
Are there any questions? Commissioner Johnson.
Can you just explain to us the access? It looks like the access from the north end from Orem will connect.
Yes, this is part of a larger kind of master plan. We've we have some conceptual plans to continue development, and we own the property all the way up to 8th North. Orem is very excited, to see, we've planned, ultimately some restaurants and, potentially like boutique hotel. But as development continues northward, the trail will have to continue northward as well.
What about 5600 North? Is that just a pedestrian access at that bridge point across the river?
5600 North right now is, and again, it's in Orem. That is I think half of the bridge is open and half, it's one lane. It's actually two bridges that were built at different times. One, has rating for vehicular traffic, and the other one, Orem wasn't so sure about. And so it's been blocked off.
I don't think I realized that there was that little inlet of Orem in between the University Avenue and that. So most of the development will be accessed from that access road on the southwest corner then, because it's not really interconnected in many other places.
So yes, so 5600 North.
5600 is one of the south in the city, in Provo City.
Okay, so that's Provo
That's
City.
the one at the bottom. That's
Okay.
5600.
But the
That's
bridge
access road.
between
Yeah.
5600 and the project is Orem. There's a little sliver of Orem in that whited out area, or no?
Oh,
Aaron's
so
gonna clarify.
the bridge 5600 North Bridge is that is 100% pedestrian.
Okay.
There is another bridge on what we'll call the access road.
That's where
that
the
one-
two different
Yeah, that one
funky
still
bridges are.
has
Okay.
vehicular access.
So as far as how people are going to get into this project that live there, in and out of this project,
can
they're
come
either
up.
going to come in from that road on the north end out of Orem,
Yeah.
or they're going to come in from that
South end off
south
of
end
River
through
Run.
that Riverwoods Park. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Hill?
Can you just tell me what's kind of in the upper left corner of this new section? What's going on there? It's kind of an open space area.
Upper left corner, that is that becomes City of Orem. That is a detention basin that serves mainly the Nexio building area. But all of that area drains, to that detention basin, and then there's and things are graded in such a way that were it to overflow in a big condition, that the overflow goes into the Provo River.
Got it.
Can you remind me if these townhomes going to be for sale, or are they?
It's a rental community. Yeah.
Can I ask the homes that are going to be closest to the river, historically, is there any flooding that occurs there? I mean, is there risk of flooding in those homes?
We have we ran a process recently. Some of it wasn't totally mapped by FEMA, and so we recently completed the FEMA mapping. All of these structures will be FEMA flood zone X, which means we're outside of a flood zone. Last winter was the winter 2022, 2023, when we had all the really heavy snows and the great skiing. In the spring runoff, we surveyed the water, all winter long, because that was the highest and the fastest the Provo River had flowed since 1984. We didn't have any problems. There was nobody ever thought that it was going to jump the bank and flow into the property or anything. So we're quite confident that we're good.
There's been a lot of work to the river in that regard since 1984, so engineering's not worried about that.
I have a question on not the upper right, but the lower right corner of the map. It looks like there's a little park space, open space that borders onto the river and the trail there. Could you explain kind of what the idea is with that area?
I was looking at the
up here. So like you can't see where I'm pointing.
I think that was what we said was are you saying this right next to the river?
Yeah, the brown part that is like connecting to or touching the trail.
It's open space. We're in a setback area where I think it's written in such a way that you can't put structures there. So we took advantage of some landscaping and just creating open space.
Okay. Yeah. Are there details on the landscaping that we can see on here? Just like what's being envisioned for that area?
I would have to refer to the plan and see we have a conceptual, that may be about it, since we're at the project plan level. You know, there will be a submittal to the city as far as, you know, the full civil document, et cetera.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to open the meeting to public comments. Seeing as those have been extremely limited, I will skip reading that, but I will say if there are any neighborhood district chairs that are welcome to come up and have 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Please just state your name and city of residence for the record.
Sharon Memmott, and I'm on the District 1 board. And I'd refer you to the letter from Robert Hammond. It sounds like, I hope that you all had the chance to read it.
We have, we've read it. Thank you.
So having said that, his biggest concerns, of course, about being that we have a site plan that doesn't, at least it's a picture. Does that make sense? And so as the developer goes to develop, we don't have specifics written that we would love to see so that we know how it's going to actually be developed so that we can be held to that standard. I'm curious, listening to this discussion, why the retention pond and the north units wouldn't be switched, simply because I wouldn't want that trail on my front doorstep, but I don't know what geography would allow. And my final comment as the chair for the area would be, I'm hoping, and it was barely discussed here, the development agreement, that it could be tied to the zone change, not to the project itself, so that if this doesn't go forward for whatever reason, we don't have to revisit that there will be a trail, that there will be a specifically public access, not just a trail. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Are there any other public comments? All right, seeing as there are none, we will close public comments and open it up to discussion among the commission. Commissioner Jensen.
This is a question for staff, because there's been quite a few iterations of these different phases coming towards us. Are we skipping straight to the project plan phase? Because usually we see a concept plan with a zone change request. Are we skipping straight to project plan because this has been previously reviewed at other stages?
So it is unusual to have project plan with a rezone. Most developers will just do concept plan because it doesn't cost as much.
Okay.
And it's risky. Every zone change is risky. This group had the plans ready, felt confident in the zone change, I think, and that's why they went straight to project plan, so they won't have to come back to you after the zone change decision.
So the decision we make today is not, I think we're used to seeing more specific details when it's a project plan. And so questions about landscaping and what the amenities are and exact layouts don't change in a project plan, right? Like what we see here is what we're approving or not. Is that correct?
And I can verify that those standards have been checked against the MDR zone.
Okay, so even though it's not as showy, it's still totally meets the requirements we should be reviewing today.
Correct. Yeah, I try to keep it high level for this meeting. Yeah.
Thank you.
My question is just per the letter we received from Robert Hammond. Just for the record, essentially the completion of the trail and public access are part of the development agreement, and the city will have the proper means to enforce that gets completed, correct?
Yeah, those are included in the draft language. It's yet to be a formal document to share, but yes, those are included as guarantees.
Thank you.
And also the materials, right? Because that was part of it, and gravel, right?
Yep, exactly.
Do we know the time frame on like when that would have to be completed, the trail access?
Before certificate of occupancy.
Okay.
Of the final building, to say. So yeah, so that will come. So the zone change, if it gets approved, they'll come back right away with building permits because they don't have to come back with the project plan. And as those buildings start to get finished up, we'll be checking for the amenities as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other discussion?
I'm wondering, since this is phase 2, is phase 1 already well underway and occupied?
Yeah, if you drive by, you'll see a building's vertical on phase 1 already.
And are people living in it, or we're not
yet.
that far?
Not yet.
Okay.
So I guess from our point of view, then, should we put that contingency in our recommendation for approval that the development agreement is finalized since that's not finished? How does that work?
And do we do that with the zone change or with the project
You
plan?
would do that with your motion for recommendation on the zone change? You-
Not with the project plan.
Not with
Yeah.
the project plan.
So it's at a higher level. Okay.
Okay. How are we feeling about the two items before us, commissioners?
I'm seeing some nods. I don't know what that means.
Well,
I mean,
for
yeah.
me, it's pretty straightforward because it's a phase two, right? It fits in with what's already there, it kind of completes it out, and importantly, keeps that public access and continues the trail on. So it's pretty straightforward as far as I see it.
Commissioner Soda?
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it's straightforward and it seems like they are prepared and as long as we get that assurance about the trails, then I'm happy for it.
All right. Anyone? I think it's a great development. We saw phase one and gave it feedback, and a lot of that feedback was incorporated. So, really like the project. My only gripe is I wish these were for sale.
Yeah,
it's not helping towards our goals that we've been discussing, but it is what it is, as they say. All right. Anyone want to give a motion?
I'll do it.
Thank you, Commissioner DeSoto.
I move we recommend approval of the proposed zone map amendment to the city council with the confirming the language of the draft, what is it called? Development agreement that ensures the trail remains public and is developed fully.
Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second.
All right, we have a second. Any discussion on the motion? Yeah. Do you want to do that for me, Commissioner Johnson? No? Okay, I'll restate the motion. The motion is that we will forward a positive recommendation to the zone map amendment from the OSPR zone to the MDR zone in order to build the 24 new townhomes located approximately at 5544 North River Run Drive, provided that the draft development agreement is formalized and includes requirements that the public access to the trail remains open and that the trail is constructed per the requirements of that agreement. All right, seeing as there is no discussion on the motion, let's move to a vote. Commissioner Shin?
Aye.
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 I'll vote aye. That passes unanimously. Now we'll move on to item 6. These have kind of been in conjunction. Would someone like to make a motion for item 6?
I think just one more thing of discussion. I think these are beautiful. So I'm excited to see something lovely be built there.
I agree. The trail will be really nice. I think it'll be an upgrade and it's lovely.
I can make a motion. I move that we approve item number 6, Jamie Chapman requests project plan approval for phase 2 of the River District Residential Project, building 24 additional townhomes over 3.18 acres in a proposed MDR zone, River Bottoms neighborhood.
Thank you for that motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
The motion has a second. Any discussion on the motion? All right, given no discussion, let's move to vote. Commissioner Shin?
Aye.
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 I will also vote aye, and that item 6 passes unanimously. All right, our final motion of the evening. 7 items. Great job, Commission. Development Services requests an ordinance text amendment to section 14.38.105 in order to add regulations for marquee signs in the downtown Provo neighborhood. Aaron Armoire will present this item.
Thank you. So a little history here. Provo City Center Street used to have a lot of these types of signs. Now there's a desire for them to come back. So this started as a discussion with DPI Downtown Provo Inc., who our Representative Quinn is behind me to speak on that, with a couple different businesses on Center Street and wanting to bring that feel back. So as they started to discuss that, we worked together with them as staff to come up with this draft language. The draft language is a start to allowing this type of signage to come back. You can see that we are proposing to initially limit it to 3 per block face. To clarify, a block face could be the north side of Center Street between 4th and 5th West. That's one block face. The south side between those same 2 streets is another block face. So you could essentially have 6 within one kind of between the 2 intersections. And then again, just limiting on area, thickness, lighting, as we do with most of the downtown signage requirements. No electronic signage, that still remains. No neon lights. That was a concern as we spoke with different stakeholders down there. That is all I have to give you kind of some existing signs that are this marquee sign type. There are 4 in existence currently. And then we would anticipate a couple more coming online if this is passed. That's all I have for this, unless you have questions for me.
I'll jump in with the question. So, for example, the Fat Daddy Pizza sign, was that against the code, or was it sort of grandfathered in?
It was grandfathered. So all 4 of these are legal non-conforming because this sign structure has been there for decades.
Got it. What was the original intent behind not allowing these signs?
Couldn't tell you. That's before my time.
Okay, I'll ask you in a moment.
I have a question.
Yeah, Commissioner Jensen.
Are all of these non-conforming or just the B&H pharmacy one as far as lighting goes? It says non-conforming lighting.
As far as lighting, so you're more specifically asking, would these meet the new sign standard?
Right. Is that what that parenthetic non-conforming lighting is referring
so
to?
that would not meet the standard.
Because it's neon instead of lit from the inside.
Right.
Okay.
I have a question on the verbiage in the amendment to the what is a hold harmless agreement?
So yeah, anything that projects into the right of way, we use the same thing for our blade signs when people ask for requested permits on them, which is an issue, but we're working on that. So we have them sign this hold harmless agreement with the city, stating that, because it's above the right of way, if there's some situation, the city isn't held liable for that. It's on the signed contract.
Meaning if a tall guy hits his head, he's not going to sue the city. He's
Or if
going
the
to
sign
sue.
Falls on a
okay.
pedestrian.
Okay.
Now, for the limit of 3, is it just first come, first serve kind of thing?
It is. That's how we're going to handle it
Okay.
and see how it goes.
What's
There's
the-
a lot
what-
of demand, so we feel that that's safe for the time being.
There's not a lot of demand. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. What's the thought on the 3? Is it just in case we don't like these, we're not doing too much damage?
Yeah, we didn't want to just open it up
Yeah.
along the whole corridor and have it get back to, if you see pictures of Center Street from like the 70s, it's too much. So we want to try to find a balance there.
Okay. Are there any I'm sure this exists, but what are like the other applicable sign design standards that would pertain to these types of signs? Like, do we have things like no obscenities or lewd?
No, that's free speech. For
Okay,
some
we
stuff.
can't do that,
Yeah,
so-
this is all of the limitations that we put on it.
So you can't actually touch any of the content of what goes. You can only just the form factor.
Technically,
Right,
yeah.
the Supreme Court's rule is if you have to read it to determine if it meets your code or not, your code is illegal.
Interesting. I like the principle.
How about political marquee signs? I'm just
So
kidding.
does limiting how many you have protect the city a little bit that way too, that you can say no to something because, oops, we already have enough, and
Right.
so we can't have yours. Okay.
Can you say that again, what you just said?
If you have to read a sign to determine whether or not it meets your sign ordinance, your sign ordinance is illegal. You cannot control content. That's free speech.
I have one question. Sorry, didn't kind of bail us off.
You're okay.
With regards to the limit of 3, I had some questions on that too, just how that would work. And you mentioned it would just be a first come, first serve situation. Are there any other kinds of ordinances like this where we have like a limit? Because as far as I'm aware, generally like in a code, you're gonna have just something by right, but this would be like it's by right conditional on how many of your neighbors are also taking advantage of this, right?
Mhm.
Are there other examples of this in current city code? And like, have we seen how that works out in practice?
Yeah, so the projecting blade signs follow the same kind of policy. So there's distance requirements on those. So technically, not everybody's going to get one. It's the first person that gets in that area might block the next with some of those thin buildings, thin frontages, and it might block the next door neighbor. But we haven't had concerns with that. I think in a future situation that we start having concerns with that, we can come back and look at this. But
Okay.
unlike what you just described, there's no, you have to be at least 10 feet, 20 feet away from the other marquee sign, right?
right, we
We're
figured
saying,
number per block would kind of satisfy.
so you
that.
could have 3 in close proximity and then nothing else for the rest of the block.
Good.
Is there a requirement on the brightness of internally lit, or would like existing
So we
brightness
have
standards
we have
be?
lumen standards for our electronic signs.
So that would be applicable here?
I supposedly that could be applicable to these box lit signs are never going to get there.
They're never,
Honestly,
okay, okay,
I'd be surprised if they got to that threshold.
okay.
I dig it.
Can Mr. Moore sit down? Yes, amazing. All right, we will open it up to public comment. I don't think there's any district chairs here, and I've already read this thing a couple times. Oh, are you a neighborhood district chair? Would you like to come and speak for 3 minutes? Sure.
Yeah.
All right, amazing. I'm sorry I misspoke.
Yeah. So a little bit of the history. You asked it. Oh, and I'm Quinn Peterson, resident of Provo. Yeah, and I represent the downtown Provo neighborhood and the Downtown Provo Business Alliance. I'm the executive director of that nonprofit. So our board brought up this discussion, and our board consists of property owners, business owners, and current city council members and previous city council members. And so a little bit of the context to the question that you asked about the history. Gary Winterton, previous city council members on our board, and he was on city council when the sign ordinance was changed to eliminate these. And it was because when you look at photos in the 70s or 80s, it kind of became a little bit of a competition to see, oh, golly, my neighbor has a big sign. I have to make mine bigger. And it just became a large arms race. And so his fear when we discussed the desire to bring this back was, do we create a new arms race? And so that was why we collaborated with Aaron to make sure that there were restrictions on size and on a few other things. Now, I mean, I think it's great if we could have a whole bunch of these in the downtown, to be honest, but we only put that in there because of the concern that was brought up by some people that were on previous council. Now, about brightness, you also asked. The language in here that talks about neon, it talks about unprotected lights. So any light will have to be covered. And because there are no electronic signs allowed in this area, yeah, they won't really be an issue.
Okay.
And then three was what we landed on because there are some examples of businesses on blocks that already have some pre-existing non-conforming blade signs, or excuse me, whatever these signs are called, and they're interested. The example that was shown in an earlier picture, for Thread. The Thread block is on the same block as Fat Daddy's and a few others, so it's just that was why we put 3. So we do have 2 applicants that are ready now to put them up and a third one that is talking to us.
Okay. Any questions?
There's a couple of mentions of like blade signs. Could you explain what that is?
So, yeah, blade sign, different way to describe it. It is a slightly different type of sign. A blade sign is usually lower, hangs above the door. It's a smaller footprint. These are usually considered more marquee sign. These are just weird words that talk about signs. I don't know. Would you guys change? Marquee sign typically is a bigger one that has lighting. A blade sign is usually a small piece of wood that doesn't have lighting. That's my uneducated answer.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
All right.
But the idea is that both of them stick out perpendicular to the facade.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other public comments? I'll see no further comments. We will close public comments. And commissioners, do we have any feedback on the item?
I think it seems reasonable. I think that the proposed sign that was shown there looks nice. I think I appreciate that it matches the kind of historic precedent of what was there, bringing something back that has some historical connection to the area. And it seems like it's hard. It doesn't seem like this is going to proliferate into some drastic change with the restriction on just having 3. And it seems like some things have been thought through with the size and the lighting and things like that, which is, it sounds good to me.
I think it's pretty hard to argue with something that bubbles up from the community, from property owners, business owners, and work in conjunction with, staff. So yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Any other discussion points? I also like it. I think they're cool. They look good. Retro, nostalgic is in. All right. Anyone willing to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
I will make a motion that we recommend approval of the proposed amendment to the City Council for item number 7, Development Services request an ordinance text amendment to section 14.38.105, signs permitted in the downtown zones, to add regulations for marquee signs.
Do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a second. Any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing no discussion, Commissioner Shin, will you kick off the voting for us?
Aye.
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 I will vote aye. That item number 7 passes unanimously. We've reached the end of our 7 items. Good job, everyone. Any motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right, motion to vote to adjourn?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.